Welcome to GrayPrimer, a weekly show that's mostly about miniatures. My name is Nick, I'm your host, and in this episode I'm kicking off like a little mini-series as I look at some out-of-print kits from Warhammer through August. Now each of these kits, the individual components inside will be available separately, and I'm going to break down the kits just to see what the value is like, starting with Feast of Bones for Age of Sigmar. And while these sets are no longer available directly from Warhammer, you may still be able to pick them up at an independent retailer, if you get lucky. But certainly all of the contents of them, miniatures-wise anyway, are available separately. But let's get stuck into Feast of Bones and see what happens when a band of Ogors meets up with some Ossiarch Bonereapers. Can't wait. Back soon. Say what you will about Warhammer, but they do some fantastic cover art. Look at these two groups of maniacs facing off against each other. I mean, they're only a couple of meters apart, and this dude is carrying what looks like a cannon from a ship, and it is just jammed full of all of the old weapons and metalwork that they could find. It's full of axes and spears and maces and dear knows what else. That's just incredible. Does he just wander around the battlefield afterwards, stuffing metal back into this before he can fire it again? That just seems so cool. It must mean it's got a heck of a reload time, but still. Ossiarch Bonereapers over in the right-hand side. The Ogors are the Mawtribes, I think, on the left-hand side. Really, really cinematic look to this. Lovely balanced artwork. You probably wouldn't want to run down the middle of there. Or if you were going to do it, you'd want to do it very fast. So let's just check out the back. This comes with the Feast of Bones book. Must be some tokens there. The core rules for Age of Sigmar. That'll be 2nd edition. 26 miniatures, and for 2 or more players, 1 to 3 hours per session. So a pretty solid way to get introduced to Age of Sigmar. But for now, let's get this unboxed. Oh, that is a mess of plastic in there. Mixed bag of bases. Some pretty big ones in there, maybe 50 mils. Some smaller sprues. This single figure is 2019, but looking at this sprue, there is a ton of space in this. Like, you do not get space like that in modern sprues. It's just not cost effective. And yeah, this is a 2004 sprue, so significantly older than that first one, like 15 years older than that other one. Here's another 2019 one. So it looks like it's going to be a mix of those two time periods. There's one of those cannons, I think. These are great. They're huge as well. And look, there's the collection of metalwork to throw into them. Love that. Some more Bonereapers. And looks like a random piece. This has come off some sprue at some point. Looks like an Ogor head. You can just see it there in all of its grisly detail. So I guess we'll have to find that. A neck and shoulders at some point. Age of Sigmar branding to protect the books and stuff from the spiky sprues. And then a lovely print of that cover art. And then we're just into the books. And we've got some more large bases. It's a nice big oval base there. I'm going to throw that head in there before I lose it. And I'll just crack open these instructions and see what we got. Okay, so we have war scrolls here for all of the characters that are included, but they're very nicely finished and really handy to have reference war scrolls like that right beside you while you play, rather than having to search through a rule book every time something happens. The Feast of Bones book here, it is like a heavyweight stock, like a magazine, a repeat of the war scrolls at the back. You can see how much handier it is having those in separate cards rather than having to go to find it here. Some beautiful images of the paint jobs to give you inspiration. And I imagine things like this get repeated in White Dwarf, but it's hard sometimes to go and track these back to find out which particular issue it was in. And then we're into the construction manual, and oh wow, that is really nicely laid out. We've got 1-to-1 representations of each of the bases. It shows what they go with. This is cool. It's great that this is all in one booklet. That's really interesting. Sometimes they just shove in a whole bunch of the retail release booklets, so you have this mishmash of construction booklets designed through the ages, and the creative approach they take to booklets does change over time, so it can be a bit of a jarring experience. This thing looks fantastic. What is this called? Ironblaster? Look at that thing. Gonna have so much fun putting that together. And then on the back here we have a color guide for how to paint it. So that's enough about the contents. Let's go get it built, and I will be right back. And here they all are, and it's a significant amount of miniatures within this Feast of Bones set. And there's good variety in there too. There's this hulking thing over here. There's these couple of weird flying around dudes. There's a whole bunch of serious muscle and meat. And then there's some of these creepy guys over here. But let's break this down, because everything you see here is available separately. I'm going to just call out some of these prices as I go. So let's start with the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and this is Vokmortian, Master of the Bone-tithe. And it's an okay looking figure. It's kind of weird. It's almost got like he's got his own little sentry hut, but it's more of a little bathtub or a rowing boat or something. It's just a weird thing for me. I'm not sure that really works. It's okay. I do like the stick that he's walking around with the heads on it. I still don't understand burning candles in the top of something. Like, who's going to keep them lit? They're just going to look like wax lumps after you take a first step out onto the battlefield. But anyhow, maybe it's magic. Magic, let's call it that. Magic keeps them alight. But the Master of the Bone-tithe there, Vokmortian, he retails at €22.50 just for that single miniature. Now we're going to go on to the Necropolis Stalkers here. You get 3 of these for €40, and they're sizable minis. They get some pretty amazing weapons too. They go on to these 50mm bases, so they're pretty sizable dudes. And this one has the Dread Falchion. So this two-handed weapon, because they've got 4 hands, they can carry 2 of them. Why not? Necropolis Stalkers have these very cool sort of 4-faceted heads, which mean you really can't sneak up on them, and they look good. I mean, I like the armor. The weapons themselves are fantastic. They're huge as well, and they've got some little details like tattered robes. And the more you look into the Ossiarch Bonereapers, you can see little bits and pieces of other skeletons, other bodies that have gone into their creation. So they're pretty grim. Grimdark fantasy, is that a thing? Anyway, here's one using all 4 hands to hold on to all 4 weapons. This is just so cool. And you can really angle these any way you want. They're all just ball and socket. They are a little bit of work to sort of hold them in place while they adhere. And these just took a little bit of time and patience to get right. The weapons this one has are the Spirit Blades and the Netherite Daggers. So, pretty good looking though. And then this third one has the same weapons, the Spirit Blades and Netherite Daggers, but I crossed the daggers at the front. I thought that was a pretty dramatic looking sort of posture there. I like the way that one's worked out too. And again, no shortage of detail on them. So 3 of those for €40, and no complaints really. Nice looking miniatures, substantial, and lots of detail to pick out paint wise, and lots of options there for how you put their arms and stuff. So yeah, I think that one's a pretty good deal. Next up, I've got the Mortek Guard, and these sell for 20 for €45. You only get 10 in this particular box, but just double that up, and that's would be €45. They're pretty good too. Lots of options again for how you put these arms and stuff. There are a few different variants on the way the legs and torsos are, but you can put the heads whatever way you want. These shields, there's a little bit of movement in them as to how you attach them on, but I thought there were some good opportunities here for adding a bit of drama with the pose. I really like this one with his sword drawn back. The next one is carrying a Soul Cleaver Great Blade, and it is absolutely a super sword. Like, look at this 2-handed monster. And I chose the screaming head there. I think it worked really well. But of course you could use any head you want with this. But this one just added the nice amount of drama for me. The standard bearer is next, and I think this one is called the Necropolis. And it looks good. I always like with standard bearers that they actually have their weapons stowed somewhere, that they're not completely defenseless. But I think it looks well. The design on the actual standard is probably not my favorite kind of look. I think there's a lot of iconography within the Ossiarch Bonereapers that would have looked better there. Mortek Guard is up next, and I think this is the last of our non-standard Mortek Guard. He's got a different headpiece, he's got I think that's a different sword, but he does look great. And I think that it's up to you really how you pose these. I mean, you could have most of them looking out over their shields if you want, but I kind of like the stance of this guy. I think it works really well. The last of the Mortek Guard I'm going to show you is this just standard trooper carrying a Netherite blade. You can outfit these with Netherite blades like this, or with like a spear. And I like this. It looks like an incredibly compact infantry unit with the sword, and I just think it works really well. I'm going to skip over the next 5 because they're very similar to that final one there. It's not to say that they're boring, it's just that they're just slight variations on the angle of the head or the angle of the arms or something. I enjoyed putting them together. They go together very quickly, very little cleanup. And like I said at the beginning of that section, €45 for 20 of those. Pretty good. Last but by no means least, for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, are these Morghast Archai. They are gargantuan figures. These come in at $48.50 for the 2, and it feels like that's a decent enough price. There's a lot of building in them. There's a huge amount to paint here. You've got these amazing bone wings, these tattered ruins. They're sort of like demonic, trapped spirits or whatever in them. There's an incredible amount of detail in the floating figure itself. There's a lot of flexibility in how you build these as well. The first of the weapons options is this Spirit Halberd. This thing is massive. It must be 20 foot long. He's holding it like it weighs nothing at all, but there's great detail in this armor. You can see the face underneath the helmet there, if you can call it a face. You can see the skulls in the waist there really clearly. And these entire things are just made out of reclaimed bodies, and such a grisly army. The Spirit Swords are the second weapon, and this one is no less terrifying. But again, a little bit of flexibility in the way the arms, the head, the body, the legs here and everything. You do have some scope for moving around these massive limbs, and another great model there. Okay, so that's the Ossiarch Bonereapers all done. Let's move on to these Ogors. And I might as well mention why I've ended up with so many Grots. So these, I have 4 of this one and 4 of this one. And the reason for that is you get 1 of each of these on each sprue of 2 Ogor bodies, including these dudes here, the Leadbelchers. So I've ended up with 8 of these, 4 of each type. And I'll quickly show you them because they're not the greatest Gretchens or Grots in the world, but they're okay. This one's carrying way too much stuff, and he doesn't look massively happy about it. But there's bits of chicken and all sorts there, so. The chicken theme continues with this one. He's got a chicken drumstick in his mouth. He's carrying around this massive club for one of the Ogors, and yeah, decent enough level of detail. They're okay, but you get a bunch of those. And then with the Leadbelchers, you'll also get these little guys. And I'll talk about the Leadbelchers in a minute. Next one's carrying a long taper. He's got his face covered, and then he's got a bunch of what look like cannonballs, could be skulls, inside a sack over his shoulder there. So that one's okay as well. They're not the best Grots in the world, but even the worst Grot is still, good for a bit of comedy value. Speaking of comedy, look at this little one up in the crow's nest of this banner. Yes, indeed, this is the tribal banner. That's just great to see. I love that. The Ogre at the bottom. I do like these miniatures. There's a nice amount of detail in them. They've got character without being cartoonish or goofy. They just look pretty serious, but fun at the same time. Enjoyable to put together. Relatively straightforward, and as you'll see from some of these others, they've added nice touches to them to make them all feel unique. This one is greeting his enemies with an open bear trap, which is just amazing. And I like the face here. You've got the patch over the eye. The beard is braided with human skulls. The shield on the belly here is pretty amazing too. And then you've got lots of accessorization options, daggers, and like the head, you've got variations on those, the types of weapons they have, and the belly shields. And you've even got sort of options for accessorizing the belt as well. Some really great ways to make these visually interesting for you. And it doesn't get more interesting than a grot in a bag hanging off your belt. That's just so much fun. No grot accessorization on this one, but a pretty meaty looking club or axe there. And you can see the differences here with the belly shield and the face. I've just noticed there's quite a bit of flash underneath those teeth, so I'll have to get the knife in there to trim that off before I prime these. I meant to mention these are €39 for 6, so really great value for money for such chunky figures, and it would take no work at all to get these converted over to something like Blood Bowl. If you just trimmed off these weapons and stuff, I think that you could have yourself 6 really, really serious ogre players with a small amount of work. This is a combo here with the screaming head and then the hand positioned this way, but it's up to you whether you use it or not. Yet another nice variant on the left arm there with this massively armored fist and another different type of head. So you can see how different these 6 are. And the trend continues with this massive spiked fist, another interesting face there, another variant on the belly shield. And yeah, tell me that's not a Blood Bowl player right there. Cut off this sword and you'll be good to go. So that was the Ogor Gluttons, and those are €39 for the 6. The Leadbelchers, which are up next, are $32.50, but for 4. You only get 2 in this set, and these are some of my favorite miniatures out of the entire box. Check out this insanity. Look at that weapon. It is a ship's cannon. He has the front of it stuffed with every possible spiky thing he could find. He's got a grot on his shoulder, lighting his taper off of another taper which is stuck behind his ear. And he's got another one in his mouth. Look at the Ogor's face. He just looks incredible. I think these are just so full of character, just packed full of visual interest. What an absolute dream that was to build, and I imagine it would be a dream to paint as well. No grot with this Leadbelcher, but he has an even bigger cannon. This is just ridiculous, but I love it. Great face as well. Some nice armor across his body there. Not sure about the spiked shoes, but I'll forgive him, because look at that cannon. Great detail throughout. Look at the texture on that barrel. You've got the stitching at the back of his trousers here. They're folded over and the belt is tucked underneath. There is no shortage of detail in these. And speaking of detail, just have a look at this Ogor Mawtribes Tyrant. Look at that face. Every part of this miniature is just really, really intricate sculpting. Fantastic finish. This thing has something new every time I look at it. I mean, look at that little skull hanging off the top of the spear there, the ones across the back, and that looks like a stormcast in the middle. This is just magnificent. And while it pushes the detail levels to the max, it doesn't feel out of place alongside these other Ogors. And that Tyrant figure is €25 on its own. The final kit in this Feast of Bones set, and this again is available separately. This is the Ironblaster and it's €30. This thing was so entertaining to build. The creature at the front, all that brilliant fur detail. You got the horns up here. You've got a pelt wrapped over this cannon. Whatever creature the horn came from, I don't ever want to meet that thing. I want to build it for sure, but I just wouldn't want to meet it. Look at that. You've got just a collection of cannonballs down inside there. This dude that's pulling this thing around is pretty terrifying from every angle. There's a tiny little grot just in there, and he's got a stick, and I don't know what he's doing. I think he's probably irritating the creature to go forwards. It's almost impossible to tell, but on that stick are tiny bite marks top and bottom, where the grot has clearly had a munch on his motivation stick. Yeah, look at the Ogor with the strapping around the cannon here to try and angle it for a shot. There are tons of options all over this thing for accessorizing it. Lots of hooks, there's lots of barrels and things, options for what you put in the top of the barrels. It is just so packed out with detail. It's just impossible to take it all in one sitting. This thing is just bananas. You may or may not be able to read that, but on his motivation stick it says Kislev. It looks like it's been made out of a signpost, and that level of detail just blows my mind. It does have a seam which runs all the way through the middle of it, and I'm going to have to do just a little bit of putty work on that to tidy that up before I prime it. But apart from that, I just think this is a great kit, great value for money. It looks incredible. I think even if you don't play Age of Sigmar, this is something you could have just sitting on a shelf, just fully painted up. And I think it just looks great. So that's Feast of Bones, the Ogor Mawtribes versus the Ossiarch Bonereapers. And I think there are some amazing kits in there. I don't think there were any real low points for me. They're super fragile. That's the only thing I'll say, especially the Ossiarch Bonereapers. You would just want to be careful with those because they can snap quite easily. The ball and socket joints can be a little bit temperamental as well. You want to make sure that when you're gluing those in, they're fully set before moving on to the next bit. But I hope you got something from this video, whether or not you're a collector of Ogor Mawtribes or Ossiarch Bonereapers. I hope you enjoyed it. The next episode is back over to Warhammer 40,000. It's Blood of the Phoenix, which pits Eldar versus Dark Eldar. I can't wait to share that with you. Until then, please like, share, and subscribe, and take care.